Hello and welcome to my educational technology semester. On my first day of school, I realized I was in the wrong class and had to be switched to a different educational technology one after the first day. Here's a little bit about my first week in this class. First, I used Flipgrid to explain to my peers a little bit about myself. Next, I created a Prezi account and followed along the weekly path. I read the articles assigned to me and began to understand the importance of educational technology in the classroom. Finally, I met my group members and we created a Google Doc. Week 2 was all about educational technology frameworks. We kicked off week 2 by doing a first week last week on Larry Cuban's blog on technology integration in the classrooms. Our first collaborative assignment was to learn about TPACK and SAMR and put them in a graphic organizer according to the ISTE standards. These are the ISTE standards for educators. They are learner, leader, citizen, collaborator, designer, facilitator, and analyst. The ISTE standards for students are empowered learner, global collaborator, digital citizen, creative communicator, knowledge constructor, computational thinker, and innovative designer. Week 3 was about learning environments and ISTE standards. For first week and last week, we had 3 blogs to read. The first one, I learned that the illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. I also learned this week that all learning is connected and personalization is at the core of learning. Inquiry drives learning, and learning happens as a part of a larger community. For our next collaborative project, we did a Prezi on constructivist versus objectivist learning environments and inserted our infographics. Pictured here is the infographic I created to contrast the two learning theories. Week 4 focused on engaging, enhancing, and extending education with web tools. For week 4, first week last week, we again had 2 passages, and this week I learned that mind tools are cognitive tools such as selected computer programs that stimulate learning and thinking in students. Our next goal for this week was to look at the mind tools on this website and see how they would enhance, engage, and extend students' learnings in the classroom. Next, I created a concept map using Bubble, and then I created a blog post which I posted in the Knowledge Board. Finally, at the end of this week, we went back to Flipgrid and explained our strengths and weaknesses in this course. My strength was that I got all the work done on time, but my weakness was sometimes I would forget to do an assignment. During week 5, we focused on the Triple E framework, more specifically design for engagement. The first week last week this week focused on engaging versus entertaining and how engaging is better since it's the first step in the Triple E framework and how students will want to learn if they are engaged. Next, we had to answer the question, are my students engaged and how will I know? This is the response I wrote. Please pause to read it. Next, we started on our tools project. We would pick a tool and describe how it could be used in the classroom in the best way, and this week focused on engagement. My tool was formative. We moved on to week 6, in which we focused on the Triple E framework, design for enhancement. First week last week focused on the purpose of education in the 21st century, and the answer is that education should prepare students for both citizenship and work. The question we were asked this week is, what will you do as a teacher to enhance your students' learning using technology? And I said that I would use PreziPass and Formative so that students can go at their own paces and always go back to see what they missed or what they need more help on. This week we went back to our websites to talk about how our tools enhance students' learning, and I again talked about Formative and how, since students can see their answers, it will help enrich and know what they got wrong and how they can do better, and I can give them feedback on the website. During week 7, we talked more specifically about the Triple E framework and extension. Our first week last week, we began to talk about PBL projects and how they followed the Triple E framework, and then more specifically how WebQuest followed the Triple E framework, and we got more into that since we had a project or a big WebQuest due in a few weeks. Next, we dove more into extension and talked about what we would do as teachers to help extend our students' learning. And I talked about how since all 3 of them go together, you must do one before the other, and I could extend students' learning by giving them meaningful projects that they will be engaged in, that they will care about in order to extend their learning in the classroom. Back to our evaluation websites and evaluated the same tool that we had been evaluating before, except this time we created an infographic. Here's my infographic on Formative where I talk about everyday life, opportunities, and relevant skills. Please pause in order to look at it fully. During week 8, we focused on digital citizenship. Our first week last week focused on PBL WebQuest and beginning on what we wanted to do for ours, and I chose the history of Cincinnati. This week I got certified in digital citizenship curriculum training. For our blog, we reached out to a teacher that we may have had in the past, and we talked about digital citizenship with them and how they see it inside their classroom. I chose my high school science teacher, Michelle Serger. As me and Mrs. Serger talked about cyberbullying, I decided to do my storyboard on cyberbullying and a quick synopsis of how it can go in schools. Week 9 focused on web-based inquiry as we continued to work on our PBL WebQuests. This week, for first week last week, we discussed why to use WebQuests for today's learners and how they can be meaningful work and meaningful learning, and then that would help us better construct our WebQuest. We also picked the website we want to use, and I picked Zoonal, my WebQuest, because I thought it was a great website and everything went in a great order. This week we also chose which inquiry model we would use for our WebQuest, and I chose the Big 6 one over the BIE one because I felt it was easier to understand for the students. This week my group also evaluated a WebQuest by using a rubric, and we ended up giving the WebQuest a 36 out of 50. During week 10, we focused on open educational resources, OERs for short, and informational literacy. Open educational resources are any type of educational materials that are in the public domain or introduced with an open license. The nature of these materials means that anyone can legally and freely copy, use, adapt, and reshare them. This is the topic of our blog post 4 that was due at the end of this week. This is the blog that I chose to do on Khan, and you can pause and read it. And then here is the lesson that I chose to do on Khan because it is an OER and perfect for 3rd graders. For this week's collaboration assignment, we went to Flipgrid and we talked about what we were going to do for our PBL WebQuest, and then we even responded to other people and they responded to us, which you can see in the little circles below everyone's names. During week 11, we focused on evaluation and assessment. This week we did a they say, I say, and then in the first paragraph we would talk about what the author had to say in his article, and then in the second paragraph we would talk about what we thought of the article and what is our opinion. Next we created a rubric based on the articles that we read, and here is my rubric for my PBL WebQuest. You can pause to get a closer look. Pictured here is an essential design checklist, and we did this to see if our WebQuest met all of the right requirements. Here is an overview of what my founding of Cincinnati WebQuest looked like. Week 12 was about the digital divide and ethical uses of technology. This week for the digital divide, we used a voice thread to talk about what our definition of the digital divide was, who it affected, and how we've experienced it ourselves. And seeing that was a really cool thing because everyone had different definitions of the digital divide and how they've experienced it in their own lives. Next, we did a blog on the digital divide and reached out to the same teacher as before, which mine was Michelle Serger. And you can pause the blog in order to read it more extensively and see what her definition was. During week 13, week 14, and week 15, we focused on digital storytelling as to help create this project, and we worked on this project throughout these weeks with answering questions with our groups and preparing to make this project for the final. Well, this is the end of my digital storytelling project about my semester. I hope you students can create one just like this and just go through week by week and just decide what you want to do. Follow your IST standards that I laid out in the rubric. Basically just have fun. You have fun looking over your semester. I know I did, and I know I had a great semester working on all this, and I'm very proud of the work that I've done, and I can't wait to dive into more education classes.